Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Kendall Hunt webinar, Swarm Learning, an Adaptable Teaching Methodology, presented by Dr. Jamie Schwandt. Recently, Inside Higher Ed published an article that I'll make available to you in the chat function, and it discusses how professors are now expected to be ready to change class modalities at any time. In the midst of this, many professors find themselves not only re-examining their classes and course structure, but pedagogy itself. How can we best teach our students, and how do they best learn? Well, in today's webinar, we hope to provide you with one answer to this question. Today, you'll learn how to transform your course by teaching students how to think, not what to think. Applicable for professors of every discipline, this flexible teaching methodology and philosophy, called Swarm Learning, functions through continuous feedback from students to professors. This feedback allows the professor to adapt how students learn concepts without changing course content. Perfect for engaging students online, Swarm Learning empowers professors to teach students how to learn, all during the course of a typical class, regardless of subject matter. Joining us today, we have Maddie Simmons, who is an author account manager here at Kendall Hunt. Maddie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Maddie will be in touch with you after the webinar today to answer any questions you might have. She'll also be providing you with a recorded link to the webinar. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jamie Schwandt. Dr. Schwandt is a maverick critical thinker and innovator who continuously challenges the status quo. He is a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt and Red Team member for the Department of the Army. He published in various journals, magazines, blogs, including the Atlas Society, Teach Thought, the Army Magazine, and many others. He's an experienced educator and is the developer of Swarm Learning. I encourage you now to familiarize yourselves with the Q&A and chat tools at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions throughout the webinar. So if you have a question, feel free to use the application of your choice to enter it, and we'll be taking them throughout. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Schwandt.
All right, well, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Megan and Maddie. All right, so let me get my screen share going here and we'll get started. All right, well, I appreciate everyone for joining this webinar. Swarm Learning, something that I've been developing, and it's actually something I should keep developing because that's what Swarm Learning is. So I'm hoping to kind of explain it to you all today. It's very confusing, but it's actually very simple at the same time. On my, see if I can move my head the right way. On my whiteboard back here, I know it's a little difficult to see, but really Swarm Learning, if I were to wrap it up, you know, and if I were to include it, then we'll be done, right? It's changing how you teach. It's not changing what you teach, who you teach, or even the technology you teach, just changing how you teach. And it's based on empowering and not dictating. And it's the fundamental piece of Swarm Learning is getting fast and consistent feedback from students to change a class while in progress. All right, so let's, if you are using the app, hopefully I'll slow it down every once in a while and I'll explain where I'm at. But I developed this Swarm Learning app really for my students. But I thought it was a interesting tool to use to actually present with. I hate PowerPoint, so I'll never use PowerPoint. But I thought this was a really interesting way to present something. The link to the app, I know Megan shared it in the chat. And then there's also a Swarm Learning kind of app/presentation feedback link, SurveyMonkey, that she also shared in the chat box. And it's also in this feedback option here. If you go to the Swarm Learning app survey, and there are 10 questions, and it looks just like this. You can complete it in the app, or you can complete it on a link or by clicking the link. But I'd appreciate the feedback. Any feedback is definitely appreciated, and it'll help me really improve Swarm Learning and improve how I present it, and so people understand it better. All right, so let's look at what it is. So if you go to the app, what it is in Swarm Learning, here's what it is. It's a teaching philosophy and methodology where students provide continuous feedback to change a class while in progress. Think of it as a class in beta mode, where the feedback changes how the students learn concepts, but does not change the concepts they must learn in order to teach students how to think, not what to think, where the overarching intent is to facilitate a fast transfer of knowledge. So that's it, that's Swarm Learning. So let's, real quick, if you want to click this option here, it just shows you exactly what Megan probably just read. So I won't bore you with that again. The link here, if you go to the teaching map, I just want to show you myself as a teacher, what I've taught. This is a system I use and my students use called Plectica. It's a systems thinking mapping software. I have another screen open here, so I'm sharing this with you now. This is another way to present using Plectica, and this is usually what I will typically use. And so I'll show you this here. So from January 2017, when I started as an adjunct, and I teach adjunct online at Fort Hays State University, to November 2020, so to now, I've taught nine times, 3 different classes, with one beginning in September or spring of 2021 at Fort Hays State University, and I'll briefly touch on that. It's this last class here, Introduction to Lean Six Sigma Principles at Fort Hays State University, which is a Division II university in Kansas. However, it's actually the 3rd largest university in Kansas, if I remember right. We're starting a new, I'm starting a new Lean Six Sigma certification and Black Belt certification program there. That's just starting. I also teach an undergraduate class called Tests and Measurements in Health and Human Performance. It's a statistics class, and then a graduate class in healthcare administration. And I've previously taught total quality management. All right, I've taught 269 students from 29 different states, with 62% of the students that I've taught being from the state of Kansas. And I've taught students from 3 different countries to include the USA. And this shows you the grade distribution my students have received. And the most important piece of my class, so my students have rated the class, Swarm Learning, through all those classes, a 4.3 out of 5. And this is the fundamental piece of Swarm Learning, where I get feedback, and they also tell me how I'm doing as an instructor. And I'll share more of that with you as the presentation moves on. All right, so that's Swarm Learning, but I know that to me it's very simple, but I know that doesn't really describe it in a simple way to you all. So what I want to do now is briefly touch on what I use to develop Swarm Learning before I get into the meat of Swarm Learning. This will kind of look at the more of an abstract way, then I'll get into more concrete discussion here in a second. So I used a framework called VMCL, developed by Derek and Laura Cabrera, friends of mine at Cornell University. They're also the authors of books such as Systems Thinking Made Simple and Flock Not Clock, which is what I used for this. So this is what I used to develop Swarm Learning. And if you read the book Flock Not Clock by Derek and Laura Cabrera, it's an awesome book. It provides a way for organizations to move from a clock and machine mindset to more of a flock mindset. Provides simple yet powerful framework called VMCL. It's vision, mission, capacity, and learning. So when you look at vision, it's our desired future state or goal. Mission is the rules of repeatable actions that we do to bring about the vision. The capacity is systems that provide readiness to execute the mission, and learning is our continuous improvements of system capacity based on feedback from the external environment. Now, briefly, let me touch on what the vision, mission, capacity, and learning for Swarm Learning is. So the vision is that students change and customize a class while in progress based on that constant and continuous immediate feedback from students. And not only just students, but based on feedback that I've received today and other presentations, I use that feedback to actually change the class as well. Swarm Learning, the mission is to teach students how to think, not what to think. Capacity, Swarm Learning strives to adapt to the needs of the learner, by injecting feedback mechanisms into the curriculum and syllabus to adapt the class as it progresses. And when I think of the Cabreras, they inform us about capacity, that we build capacity to do our mission. And things you do every day build capacity. And again, the mission is teaching students how to think, not what to think. And then the most important piece is learning. And this is from the Cabreras as well. They mentioned learning from feedback requires adaptation. The more you learn, the better your ability to adapt and grow. And it is a simple concept. If you don't know what to expect, then how can you expect to improve? Adaptation is a necessity, and the Cabreras inform us that the need to adapt creates a need for learning. And learning is primarily done through feedback indicators in swarm learning. So again, I know that probably still doesn't clarify anything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into the meat of it a little bit and show you really what swarm learning is. And it's applicable, as Megan said in the beginning, you can't pigeonhole it to one specific type of class. I can't pigeonhole it for statistics. I can use it for, you can use it for statistics, history, really anything. It's a teaching methodology and philosophy and methodology. Okay, what I want to show you now is something I've created recently. If you go to the wiki and you go to the X matrix, I'm going to show you, it's a Hoshin-Conry X matrix is what it's called. And if you read a book called the Certified Six Sigma Black Belt Handbook, and then there's many other books that talk about this, but this gives a good description of it. And this X matrix and the Hoshin-Conry philosophy, here's kind of what it is. The word Hoshin refers to a shining arrow, such as found on a compass, hence why you see a compass on the matrix there. The word Conry can be translated as management. Hoshin-Conry provides tools for stating objectives for an organization and managing the implementation of those objectives. They define the X matrix as you can call it policy development matrix, but I think it's probably it's more than that. It summarizes the strategic plan linking objectives with design for achieving them. So let's see if I get my pen to work here. If you look at objectives here, so then it moves in a clockwise direction to strategy, tactics, and targets. And that's how I'm going to discuss these. The strategies are supposed to support the objectives, and the tactics support the strategies, and the targets support the tactics. And how they do that, if you see the first objective here, change, adapt, and evolve with student feedback. They redesign the syllabus to ensure the class is set up in a way that changes, adapts, and evolves, CAE. That is supporting this objective there. And you can tell by the black box that's shaded in there. So these two strategies here support the second objective. So that's kind of how they work, and the same for tactics, supporting strategies, and targets supporting tactics. All right, so I'm going to begin with objectives. The first one there at the bottom. And when you look at swarm learning, or you look at it, when you think about swarm learning, I want you to think of it as a chameleon. It changes, adapts, and evolves. And education is a complex adaptive system, a CAS. A complex system is one that is difficult to understand and predict. A system is a group of interacting parts forming a whole. A CAS is a collection of simple agents interacting in a system where the large-scale behavior of the system is difficult to predict and may change, adapt, and evolve. A system that changes seeks to make things within the system different. A system that adapts is one that makes things fit by change, and a system that evolves is one that seeks incremental change over time. If the goal, which the goal in swarm learning is to increase the speed of the transfer of learning and to teach students how to think, not what to think, then we must view learning as a CAS, a complex adaptive system. And if a CAS is one that changes, adapts, and evolves, and we need to create an environment that facilitates this, and that's what swarm learning is one of the primary goals of swarm learning. If change means making something different, then we should seek to make the system different. To do this, we need feedback from those within the system. If the system we're attempting to change, here's an education system, then we need feedback from students. we want to change the system, then we must adapt to the needs of the students. If adapting to the needs of the students means making something fit by change, then we should seek continuous feedback from students. We should then use their feedback to change a class. If we seek to change that class, then we should strive to continuously modify the class to adapt to the needs of the students. To modify the class must evolve, and to evolve means incremental change over time. So swarm learning seeks continuous student feedback to incrementally change a class over time that fits the needs of the student. Thus, swarm learning changes, adapts, and evolves, and it must do that to be swarm learning. And it seeks spontaneous change, changing, adapting, and evolving. And to spontaneously change, adapt, and evolve, we must create an environment where where learning is engendered by self-assembly. To do this, we must step back and simply set the conditions for a class to self-assemble, and that's the empowering portion. So to do this, I want you to think of how we put together Legos. If we typically purchase a specific Lego box with specific instructions for how to put the Legos together, it's like, I want you to think of that as like writing a syllabus with no room for adaptation. You simply provide your students a set of instructions and put the Lego pieces together in the exact order prescribed. But what if we threw away the instructions? What if instead of structuring a class and never deviating from it, you use simple rules and allowed the class to self-assemble or emerge on its own? So that's what swarm learning attempts to do, to mimic this self-assembly example. Swarm learning provides students what's called a complex adaptive syllabus, so a play on the complex adaptive system, a complex adaptive syllabus, a CAS, as well, and seeks to change while the class is still in progress based on that student feedback. Swarm learning provides a Lego box, but instead of the detailed instructions that you get with them, it provides simple rules or boundaries to build within, allowing and empowering students to be the creators. And before I continue on with the discussion, I wanted to show you, clear the drawings here, something I'm creating in this app for my students is this, the tab here, jobs. So when I think of why I would send my kid to college, or why I would go to college, is to get a job, to really get a career. And so what I'm trying to help my students with is just that, adding immediate value upon graduation or certification, whatever it is. And so what I intend to do here is share with my students industry expectations and certification information for whatever I teach. So I intend to have, and I've done it in previous classes, I just haven't put it on here, different industry experts speak to my classes or do videos or provide expectations for students. And what my hope is to do is, if students leave my class, they will stay informed, they will stay connected to my class, and they'll provide the feedback of what we should be teaching so they add that immediate value. And what I do here as well is I'm adding different links to jobs for students so they could see it. So you look at this one, it's usajobs.gov for a Lean Six Sigma black belt, for example, and it gives an idea of what a student could leave a certification program to apply for a job and potentially potentially earn, and then some expectations as well. And I have that for the 3 classes I teach now, like for the healthcare administration jobs. Again, it just another different links that provide more information on jobs and expectations for them. All right, 1 second there. I closed out my app. So as I'm pulling my app back up, and hopefully I won't close it next time. One thing I wanted to share with you all as well was a certification program that I am starting at Fort Hays State University, a Lean Six Sigma certification program. And I share that with you because it shows that swarm learning is not specific for any type of instruction or type of class. Swarm learning is for any type of class. So if you go in the Swarm Learning app, you can find this by going to Lean Six Sigma version 2.0, and you'll notice a link to a Fort Hays State Lean Six Sigma landing page for a certification program that I'm starting at Fort Hays State University. And my intent here is to use Swarm Learning, use the methodology of Swarm Learning to help move Lean Six Sigma beyond what it is, and really that's why I'm calling it Lean Six Sigma version 2.0, and introducing different frameworks and methodologies such as DSRP, which is Systems Thinking version 2.0, Red Teaming, Scrum, Biomimicry, Cynefin framework, stuff like that moves Lean Six Sigma beyond what it is. It'll help students look at complex and chaotic problems instead of just looking at simple or clear or complicated problems, which is what Lean Six Sigma really is geared towards. And then it also has a link to the same app as well. All right, now back on track here. All right, so on the X matrix, let's bring it back up here. For the second objective, objective B here, teach students how to think, not what to think. And for this, I'm going to take you go to the Wiki tab and go to Swarm Learning Explained, CA and Desired Path, and then click Desired Path. This first couple images from my book, Swarm Learning, teach students how to think, not what to think. The second app I'll leave up here as I discuss this. And for those of you who are familiar with the desired path, that's really what Swarm Learning is designed to be. So I want to give you a scenario here. Just imagine you're given the task of constructing a blueprint for new buildings at Fort Hays State University. You begin with the assumption you have no control as to where buildings will be constructed, but you have full control as to where sidewalks and roads will be placed in between and around each building. In addition, you are provided a team to assist with this project. And one of your team members provides you with an image and points out that there are two specific paths that are not paved, yet seem to be paths students will typically take. One path takes students from an apartment complex to university, while the other takes students from a parking lot to university. You notice students ignore the paved paths and create their own. A desired path is a path created by animal or human foot traffic, typically a shortcut or the shortest route between two places. A review of possible desired paths at Fort Hays State, you and your team decide not to pave any paths. Instead, you decide to simply plant grass, let students walk on the grass, then wait to see which paths emerge. And as you can see on this image here, can you spot the desired paths? And I give you the answer at the bottom. But the desired paths are the line right here, taken from apartment complex, so you can't see in the image here though, to the university, and another one taken from in one of the parking lots here to the university. You can see that the desired paths are the students will take that shortcut to kind of cut across there. Now, Swarm Learning uses the concept of desired paths, like I mentioned, where the traditional route would be to place a sidewalk and then place a whole bunch of signs, saying "stay out the grass," with a whole bunch of exclamation points. Swarm Learning is like waiting for a path to emerge and then paving the path. Yet it goes further. It's like never paving a path and allowing new paths to continuously emerge. That's the essence of Swarm Learning. It asks students to create the paths they desire. It does this by asking students how they learn a concept and empowers them to pave their own path toward understanding it. One thing that on C and D for the X matrix, if I go back to it, I won't go into this one. It'll take too much time, and it's kind of an abstract way to look at it. I want to get more into the meat of it here. But if you go to the swarm transfer triangle, and let me show you the X matrix so you know where we're at here. The last two, C and D, it covers it for objectives: create an environment facilitating a faster transfer of learning, and create an environment where students, both current and former, along with experts, provide feedback changing the class. And I'll get into more specifics on that one for sure in this presentation. But one of the ways that one of the abstract ways that I look at the transfer of learning in swarm learning is, as you can see these images here, or this image here, it's from my book again, but it's swarm transfer triangle. And again, I'm not going to get into that, but I encourage you, if you purchase the book or if you look at that image, to see it, take a shot at trying to figure out what that is. All right, now let's go back to the X matrix. Let's look at those strategies that are supposed to support my objectives. The first one is redesign the syllabus to ensure that the class is set up in a way that change, adapts, and evolves. And this one is using my my course, my complex adaptive syllabus, and I'll show you one of the my most recent one. If you go to course information, which this is where I share with students course information for all the 3 courses. If I click the complex adaptive syllabus, if you click that, what we brought up is a Medium blog post, and that's how I complete the complex adaptive syllabus. I use medium.com or some other blog services to post or publish my complex adaptive syllabus. And I won't go through this whole thing with you. And I also have a traditional syllabus as well that my classes use, because a lot of them are confused, as I'm sure you are by now, but they're very confused at this point in time. I just hit them right away with this, but it's fairly simple once they look at it later and they're able to actually appreciate it later on. And it gives examples of different assignments that my classes completes when they complete their maps. You can see this is a good representation of completing assignments. I call them knowledge trails, which I'll show you. I'll get into more here in a second. But this shows you how different students think, how they get to an answer, how they provide me feedback even. And I'm going to share this with you later. They publish blogs, my students do. They're 51 total, actually a 52nd. Another one just did one last couple days. They communicate in a Swarm Learning Facebook group, which is the idea of a student, which I'm going to get into that here as well. But this is that's my complex adaptive syllabus. In the X matrix, the next one was redesign the class structure so the focus is on the student body of work, not the answer. And for that, I want to go into the structure of swarm learning. So more confusion coming up. So I use the form, fit, and function is how I'm going to describe swarm learning. And for any military history buff, I use T.E. Lawrence's philosophy in that it seeks to make quick decisions and adopt alternatives to reorient after comparing relevant information to irrelevant information. And I use that because I like some of I love how he structured his strategy of war, I guess. But it gives some good analogies and some good metaphors as well. So contemporary education is similar to trench warfare and bayonet charges, where swarm learning is more in line with irregular warfare and relies on intelligence over obedience. Whereas contemporary education favors testing and rote memorization, swarm learning favors the indirect approach to education. Swarm learning doesn't use the typical true and false multiple choice exams. In fact, there are no exams in swarm learning. In contemporary education, the goal is to teach to the test, to teach what to think, not how to think. However, in swarm learning, the goal is to throw away the test and do the opposite, to teach how to think, not what to think. And it uses the 3 elements of war of T. Lawrence, called stochastics, bionomics, and diathetics. And really, to understand those, I really want you to think of form, fit, and function. Where form is bionomics, fit is diathetics, and function is stochastics. And when speaking of form and function, I want you to think of the shape of an object and how that object's purpose or how it's related to the object's purpose and intended effect. For example, think of the shape of a door, that's form, and how the door opens and closes, its function. The door is made using specific form and function, and is to open and close so that people can move in and out of the door into different rooms. That's its fit. All right, so to identify those, we can ask certain questions for form. Does it look good? Is it aesthetically pleasing? Fit, does it make sense? Does it bring about clarity? Function, does it have the intended effect? Does it have the intended impact? And another quick example that I have here of what it means is, if you think of a camera and the form, fit, and function. The function of the camera is to take pictures. The form, I want you to think of its parts, the lens, sensor, and the overall camera itself, and then how it all fits together in a way that allows the camera to work. That's fit. And then swarm learning just modifies form, fit, and function, use Lawrence's elements, stochastics, bionomics, and diathetics. I won't go into detail on all these, but when I think of stochastics, think of the function, think of y equals f of x. We're looking at the concepts and the ideas that students must learn. And the way this is the assignments. Stochastics consists of students learning to read, write, and lay knowledge trails, is what I call them, and feedback trails, and essay maps, and swarming the canvas. These are the assignments. Feedback trails, very similar. I'm going to give you an example of a feedback trail here in Plectica. This is how students provide feedback to me, and through the Survey Monkeys. But feedback questions, and it's just interesting to see the creativity that students will provide in providing me their feedback. Let me go back to get back on track real quick, go to bionomics before I show the rest of you. All right, so bionomics, without getting into the discussion of T. Lawrence, I want you to think of the learning environment or the complex adaptive syllabus, the Swarm Learning Facebook group for bionomics. Diathetics, the logic behind swarm learning. And one of the interesting things that I did in my last class is, one of my goals, as I mentioned, is to help them with employment, to get jobs to provide immediate value to, upon graduation or even during a class. So with the COVID stuff going on, this semester, my students completed Johns Hopkins University's COVID-19 contact tracing certification, and working in state and local communities to actually allow the students to be employed with that certification. And then with diathetics as well, the feedback indicator I do for my class, for example, it's a 2-question survey that's on my class website, and just gives me quick feedback, and is one of the most important pieces of the class, and that's new to the class this semester. All right, let's go to knowledge trails real quick. I didn't show you the example, this one. Again, it's very interesting to see what it looks like from each student. Everything looks so much different when they complete the same exact assignment. And what I love about Plectica, it allows me to see how the student got to the answer, or how they got their thinking. The answer is not important to me. It's what their thinking is and how they got to their conclusion. Essay maps. So my students complete 3 of these a semester, and their goal is to create these essay maps or blog maps, and then write an essay or blog at the end of the semester on this topic that they choose. So for example, my students, depending on the class, if they're in healthcare administration, they have to write a blog or an essay on improving something in healthcare administration, but using an innovative tool of their choosing. And a lot of them like to choose biomimicry, or they choose the Cynefin framework, which this one was a Cynefin framework. And it just really interesting to see the conclusions they come to, and how they structure things. And you can really see things start to take off for them as far as aha moments and epiphanies, and it's very fun to see them evolve. Every assignment they complete a feedback trail, and they are not feedback trail, sorry, a Survey Monkey, and I give a couple examples here. very similar to what you all will complete for the survey. All right, let me try to speed things up here a little bit. All right, so I want to share with you where my students, what they use for their learning environment. My university uses Blackboard. I don't really use it. I only use it for grading. I use WordPress. So here's an example of my WordPress page, and you don't have to use any of what I'm talking about. The only thing in Swarm Learning is fundamental piece is getting and using that feedback and teaching how to think, not what to think. Really, I mean, you can use the technology again. You can use whatever technology you want. You can even use the dreaded PowerPoint. But here's a example of the WordPress site I use. Sometimes it's, I make things a little too busy probably. But just to orient you to a little bit, my students use modules in what I call the C model, the sense, estimate, and establish. But you can see every module, they complete KTs, EMs, and FTs, and they also do a Swarm in the Canvas assignment, which I think I will share with you that assignment because it's a very important one. But I post the assignments here on this on the class WordPress site. My students post their assignments here as well. They can see Swarm Learning app updates or weekly updates here. They can do I've embedded in here the continuous feedback indicator and stuff like that. But this is where my students, post their stuff, share information and stuff like that. All right, let me go back real quick to Swarming the Canvas assignment. If I can find the right button here. And to get there, I want to share with something I'm putting together. I need to clean this up. It's called the Swarm Learning Wiki, just on my website, jamieschwandt.com. Again, it needs to be cleaned up, but it's got a lot of information that I use, such as student writing, student maps, assignment instructions, and the student maps helps out a lot of the students that are just starting. I'm slowly populating maps on here that students, so they could see past maps from previous students. The Swarm Learning Writing, the student writing. So my students also publish blogs, like I mentioned, and you can see a list of all the blogs that my students have published. I'll share one with you here in a moment. But Swarming the Canvas, I wanted to share this with you. It shows a collaboration assignment that students are able to complete. And what I do is we won't watch the whole video, obviously, is I provide simple rules that are over here, simple rules, so they operate within. And the students, you can see the little arrows moving around. This is in Plectica. They're slowly, after they digest this information, there's no sound, no voice, there's no other communication really. If they want to communicate, they'll type in a card, or there is a chat function. But what they do is they start digesting information, and then they start constructing knowledge. And it's kind of like ants moving around an anthill, or coming in and out of an anthill, as they start creating knowledge here, really. And then they start feeding off of each other, creating certain things. And it's really interesting to see. I need to make it more structured for them the next time, but it's really interesting to see what they come up with as a group with really no communication, just using these rules to operate within. All right, I'm going to share with you the Facebook group real quick. Swarm Learning Facebook group, discussion group here. My students, I even posted today's meeting in there, or today's webinar. But my students share different ideas with each other. They post assignments and they interact with different experts, such as the Cabreras I mentioned, Dave Snowden, who created the Cynefin framework. The 156 members of the group, they interact with them and they write, they use them to discuss writing blogs about their topics, stuff like that. And one of the important pieces in here is when I start a new class, I'll ask previous students from different classes, because they'll stay in the Facebook group, interact with them. I'll ask them to mention what they thought about Swarm Learning, so students don't immediately just panic and get out and drop the class, because students are terrified when they begin it, but then they realize it's not that hard and it's actually fun to use this methodology. But the Swarm Learning Facebook group is essential for student success and not dropping the class. When I talk about simple rules, I want to share that with you. If you go back on the app, and actually, let me take you back to the X matrix here so I can get you back oriented just a little bit to where we're, what we're talking about here. When I look at, I've kind of moved you through a lot of it so far, but when I talk about publishing assignments with simple rules and grading based on how the student thinks, which ties in with this strategy, I want to share with you the simple rules of Swarm Learning. All right, so here are the simple rules of Swarm Learning, and then there are more concrete rules within each assignment. But from a big picture point of view, Swarm Learning, rule number one is providing boundaries for students to create within. It's think of it as the what, not what to think, but the concepts that you're teaching. Rule number two is empowering students to think and develop the how. Rule number three is examining the body of work. Look at the student, look how the student got to their answer instead of focusing on the answer. Again, that's very important. And then using student feedback to make immediate changes, then repeating. So if you think of it, like if I were just to draw a box and providing the boundaries, those are the boundaries, that's the what. And then empowering students to think and develop the how. So if your students are inside here, they are working with each other to come up with the how. And then what I'm doing is I'm looking at the body of work, looking at how the student got to their answer instead of focusing on the answer. I want to see what their thought process was, how they're thinking, instead of just focusing on, well, what answer did they get? And Practica is perfect for that because it allows me in a systems thinking diagram to see that. And then using student feedback to make immediate changes in the class and then repeating. All right, and then the simple rules I use for inside of a class, inside of an assignment, for example, I'll share an example with you. If you go to the WordPress site, or you see any the WordPress site I use, or it's in my app as well under assignment rules or how-to assignments, how-to videos. I create how-to videos with assignments and post them for my students. And I'll usually have either a Practica map or a PDF that they can see the simple rules as well as a how-to video. But the simple rules that I use are in the form of what's called SMEAC, or the acronym SMEAC. I give them a situation, their current reality. I give them their mission. It's the objective or the intent, the execution, the how or the plan, administration, what they'll need, and communication, how they communicate. And those are the simple rules I give them for every assignment. And then I will also use look in the course info. I provide two surveys to my students. One is called the Need for Cognitive Closure Survey, and you can click on that, read an article I wrote for Military Officer Association magazine on that. But it I want to see how much closure they need. Do they need? So I scored very low on that. I do not need closure. I'm very comfortable with ambiguity. Where on the other hand, my wife, for example, needs a lot of closure, which isn't, it's not negative for either one of them, but it's interesting to see how they score on that survey, and it does kind of flush out. And then they do a 16 personalities, just a free and quick kind of a Myers-Briggs type survey. And then I'm also interested in looking at the correlation between the two, if there is any. But I provide my students those surveys at the beginning of the class to get an idea of who they are and how they think at that point in time. And I don't think I'll talk about this, but one of the ways that I do assess learning, and I don't know, Megan, how much time do I have left? I'm looking at your chat box. Should I try to wrap things up or keep going, you think?
We've got about 10 minutes, so wrapping things up is a good idea, but I think that's a great idea to get into assessment and kind of some practical application. I think that's great.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now then is I'm going to share with you what I developed, and so how I use their feedback. So if I don't have something to use student feedback, then it's kind of pointless, because then that means I'm not doing anything with their feedback. So if you go to the Swarm Learning Explain, you go to logic model, and I promise I'm still following along with the X matrix, but decided it was a little tedious to keep going back and forth. But if you look in these images here are from my book. So I developed, along with VMCL, I used a logic model to develop swarm learning. But the important piece is when I do those feedback surveys, when I do the SurveyMonkey surveys, so you can see the example there from KT9, knowledge trail number 9 for a class, is, I'll zoom in here. I use their feedback on a decision support matrix. And the matrix, what it does, it assesses these 5 specific, or these 7 specific criteria: knowledge transfer, understanding of concepts, time of completion, clear or ambiguous, assignment delivery method, critical and creative thinking, level of interest, and then I have these decision factors, these 5 decision factors here. But so what I do is each survey, or every survey is very standardized in this way, so then I can really figure out each time what I need to change, or if I need to change. So knowledge transfer, for example. So if concept A is discussed and concept B is discussed, and did the student understand the relationship between the concept A and B? Understanding of key concepts. If concept A is discussed, then can the student clearly explain the concept? I look at time of completion. How long did it take to complete the assignment? Clear or ambiguous? And I want some ambiguity in here. So my goal is to balance the two. So I want students to get used to that. Assignment delivery method. What did they think of it? How much critical and creative thought did they put into the assignment, and what was their level of interest in the assignment? And then for the decision matrix, to assess their feedback, it simply lists the values in rows and columns, and each row and column allows the instructor to analyze the relationship between criteria and decision factors. And the criteria within the matrix, I use if-then rationale here, as well as weighted decision factors. So I'll use these factors. I get to figure out if I need to simplify the assignment, expand it, eliminate it, make immediate changes, or keep as is. An example that I use here, is from the figure 9 there in the book, the decision matrix. If I were to take the average scores from the surveys and enter the average score into the matrix, in the example in figure 9, the average score for understanding key concepts was a 4, using a 1 out of 5 scale. Score out of 5 would demonstrate a strong understanding. The score of 4 is a good indicator that students are successfully understanding key concepts. And the example, minor adjustments might be needed to be made. However, overall, the assignment could be kept as is. And that's how I really assess my students' feedback, to see if I need to change that assignment And typically there will be some obvious modifications and whatever's happening at the time. And then I use obviously a lot of qualitative feedback from the students as well. But that's a way that I can really look at their feedback to see what I need to change. All right, and I'm not going to get into the targets on the X matrix. What I'm going to do is I just want to share with you briefly some of the other stuff that I'm creating in the app for my students. An option here for tools, for example, if we have an assignment, what I want to do is I want to share with them specific tools to use. And so like a good red teaming tool that I love is called 4 Ways of Seeing. If you click on that, it brings up a video on how to conduct the
is called
4 Ways of Seeing. Analysis competing hypothesis brings up an article I wrote for a program that students can use for this. And the program actually references this article. And a whole bunch of different tools to include the X matrix. And then the last one here, then I'll open up some feedback, is using almost like question prompts in a way. For example, like an A3 steps, A3 thinking steps, kind of lays out questions. Productive thinking model from an awesome book called Think Better, Innovator's Guide to Productive Thinking by Tim Herson. Gives some steps there, what to do for productive thinking model. For example, like step 1, what's going on, then goes into the sub steps. And so I'm using that for my students to give them a quick reference to go to some of these tools. So yeah, so I think it's probably safe for me to end it there. I could keep going, but I won't shut up. And just please don't forget to complete this Swarm Learning survey so I can get that feedback. But I'll go and open it up to, turn it to Megan first, and then open it up to some questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jamie. And I'd just like to mention quick that all of these concepts that Jamie has been discussing and going over are available in his book that he authored. And once you close out of the webinar, you'll be directed to that page so you can learn a little bit more about that. But we did have a question a little earlier, and you addressed it in part, so I didn't mention it before, but part of the question was, how could, say, a history professor use this technique? What are some of the natural ways that you could see this applying to various other disciplines?
And I think my answer probably earlier was simply, I mean, you really don't have to change too much. It's just how you change how you teach. And it's looking at their body of knowledge, is looking at how they got to an answer, not the answer itself. And it's really getting that student feedback, empowering them, giving them simple rules, and getting feedback and using the feedback, not waiting to the end of a semester to do the end of course evaluation and forgetting about it, or students never completing it. Using these different feedback mechanisms, like I use the Survey Monkey for every assignment they complete. It's required for them to complete that. And then I use feedback trails. There's 4 of those every year that I give them questions and they can add to them. And then when they do the end of course evaluation, they're all completing because they're used to doing feedback, but I don't wait. So when a student, for example, gave the recommendation of a Facebook group, I immediately implemented it, used it, and it was pretty popular, and it was used, and I was able to connect former and current students. But really, it's just incorporating what you're already doing and just changing how you teach what you're already doing, if that makes any sense. So hopefully I answered that question.
Perfect. Are there any other questions? There was one about assessment, and you kind of mentioned before. I feel like you spoke to that one a little bit already, so we're good there. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, everyone. Just a reminder that Maddie will be in touch with you in the coming days to provide you with the recording of today's webinar. We're pleased you could join us today. If you're interested in this publication for course adoption, you can contact Maddie at msimmons@kendallhunt.com. Thanks and have a wonderful day.